Welcome to the deep dive. You've come to us with, well, an archive of material so vast it really does fundamentally shift how we understand organized crime.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. We're not just analyzing a few articles today. What we're doing is providing you with a kind of navigational roadmap, a guide to an entire ocean of information.
That's a great way to put it,
Yeah.
an ocean. Because the source material, this collection known as the Connect, it's more than just a series of interviews.
Much more.
It's one of the largest, if not the largest, interview collections of its kind ever put together. We're talking about the distilled knowledge from over 380 individual, really in-depth conversations.
When I first saw that number 300 and plus, my first thought was, okay, this isn't biography anymore. This is sociology. This is an anthropological study.
Right.
You're not just hearing one person's story about how they got started or how they got caught. You are literally listening to a cartel accountant, a mafia soldier, a white-collar fraudster, an undercover ATF agent.
A professional gambler. A street kid from Harlem.
All of them describing the exact same world, but from their own unique and often conflicting vantage points. And when you get that kind of volume, the single anecdotes start to fade a little.
And patterns emerge. Systemic truths.
Exactly. The systemic truths come into focus.
Precisely. The real power of an archive this size is that you can finally move beyond the sensational headlines. A single interview, it tells you a story. It's one person's journey.
Sure, one data point.
But when you overlay 380 of them, you suddenly see the entire interconnected ecosystem. You start to see these universal patterns, the specific economic math they're all doing,
The logistics problems they all have to solve.
the entry points into the life, which are shockingly consistent, and the absolutely inevitable downfall. It's a cycle.
And that cycle repeats, whether you're talking about a crack kingpin in 1980s New York or a young sicario working for CJ&G in Mexico today.
The details change, but the core structure of the game stays the same.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to map that territory for you, the listener. We're going to introduce the incredible scope, who is actually interviewed, and why that diversity is so critical.
We'll cover the specific eras, the evolution of the game over time.
And, most importantly, we'll start to unpack those universal repeating patterns that you can only see when you have this much source material to draw from. We're going to get into the economics and really the psychology of the entire shadow economy.
So let's start with that scope, because the sheer breadth of it is, I think, the most important thing to grasp right away.
It's staggering.
It is. This is not just a narcotics archive. I mean, yes, drugs form the financial backbone of a lot of this world, and we'll talk about that.
Of course.
But the people interviewed, they include dealers at every single level, cartel members, traditional mafia figures, professional bank robbers.
Sophisticated money counterfeiters, white-collar fraudsters, even professional gamblers who operate in that gray area.
And this is crucial. It also includes the counter voices, the other side of the coin.
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement at every level, from the beat cop to the federal agent who spent years undercover. Arms dealers, too. You get the full picture.
And that functional breadth is the key, analytically. It forces you, as the listener, to stop seeing the criminal world in these neat little boxes, the way Hollywood shows it.
Right. The mob over here, the cartel over there.
Exactly. As if they're totally separate. But this archive shows it for what it is. A complex, highly integrated, and fully functioning economic system.
These groups are constantly connected. They're linked by the movement of cash, of weapons, of information. They share logistical networks, whether they realize it or not.
And because you have this volume and this diversity, you can do something that's almost impossible with fragmented reporting.
You can trace the supply chain.
End to end, you can literally follow a product from a plant in the Andes all the way to a street corner in the Bronx, hearing from the people who touched it at every single step.
So let's do that. Let's start at the source. The archive has these incredible interviews with the very early Colombian manufacturers.
We're talking late 1970s, early 1980s here.
Exactly. This is the period before the huge monolithic organizations like the Medellin Cartel had fully verticalized the whole process.
So these are the pioneers?
These are the pioneers, the guys who are taking raw coca paste, often from Bolivia or Peru, and doing the chemistry to turn it into crystalline cocaine in Colombia.
And the numbers, the economics of it, even back then?
The economic analysis you can derive from these interviews is just stunning. We have accounts from that time showing that even on those early years, they were making roughly $50,000 in pure profit
For what amount of product?
per 300 kilos. Now today, We hear about multi-ton seizures, so 50 grand might not sound like a lot.
It sounds like a lot to me for the late 70s.
Well, that's the thing. You have to remember, the market was just opening up. The price per kilo was astronomically high, so the margins were incredible.
Yeah, that risk to reward ratio was just completely off the charts.
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah.
And that $50,000 per run, that was the foundational capital. That's the seed money that built the colossal organizations of the late 80s.
Okay, so the product is manufactured. Now it has to move. The logistics phase.
And this is where the stories get wild.
Yeah.
The archive has unbelievable accounts, including from Roger Reeves,
The pilot.
the Medellin Cartel's #1 pilot. He details the airdrop operations, the cat-and-mouse games with radar, the sheer sophistication it took to move tons of cocaine across borders back then.
But it wasn't just planes and boats, was it? I mean, that's the movie version.
Not at all. The logistics are far more diverse. We have these granular accounts from ground-level smugglers talking about low-tech, high-stakes solutions.
Like the trap cars.
Exactly, the use of trap cars. Hidden compartments, sure, but also the little bits of field-level innovation. Dipping kilos in oil or covering them in coffee grounds or other chemicals. Just trying anything to mask the scent and defeat the drug dogs.
It's a constant technological arms race, even at that level.
It is. And this brings us to one of the most profound insights a collection this size reveals about modern crime. It's about the reliance on legitimate infrastructure.
The quote.
The quote. One of the sources makes this astonishing observation that just forces you to rethink everything. He says, UPS, FedEx, and the USPS have shipped more drugs than Pablo Escobar and El Chapo combined.
Wow. When you hear it put that way, it just clicks.
It's the key to understanding modern cartel operations. The criminal enterprise isn't defined by its most dramatic, isolated movements. It's defined by how successfully it can co-opt and hide within legitimate high-volume systems.
Because if you're shipping 1 million packages a day, what's one more?
Exactly. It's high velocity and low visibility.
Right.
Those are the two critical metrics for any supply chain manager in the world, whether they're working for Amazon or the Sinaloa cartel.
So the product makes it across the border, hidden in plain sight, and it reaches the retail end.
And the archive has these incredibly rich, detailed conversations with, for instance, Harlem Crack and Kingpins. And these guys were not simple street corner pushers. They were sophisticated operators.
They were businessmen.
Absolutely. They were purchasing wholesale powder cocaine from their Dominican connections and running these incredibly professional, coordinated street spots.
And the money they were making was just...
They were often clearing $15,000 to $20,000 a day. A day. And they talk about the economics of it, buying wholesale keys of coke for 15 grand when the market price was 22.
So the real money wasn't in selling the individual rocks.
No, the real money was in controlling the wholesale purchase. It's about leverage and controlling your supply chain. Same principle, different product.
So moving from that street level view up to the macro geopolitical level, this is where the archive's value really shines. It lets you do these direct, nuanced comparisons between different organizations.
You can put them side by side.
Let's take the Mexican cartels, for example. They're heavily profiled. You get these deep dives into the Sinaloa cartel.
And you see its evolution. You see the contrast between the old vertical hierarchical structure, like a traditional corporation,
Right.
which is how El Mayo Zambada still operates,
Right, the old guard.
and the newer, more decentralized, almost freelance model that's favored by factions like Los Chapitos, who mostly control the urban hub of Culiacan.
So what's the difference in their business models?
Well, the sources suggest El Mayo controls the traditional agricultural product. Yeah. The poppy fields, the fentanyl cooks, and the major border plazas like Tijuana and Nogales. It's a classic top-down command structure.
And the Chapitos?
They're more agile, more focused on maximizing synthetic drug distribution. They're like a disruptive tech startup, in a way. Well, El Mayo is IBM.
That's a terrifying analogy, and that contrast gets even deeper when you bring in a group like the Zetas.
Oh, the Zetas changed everything. They're described by one former Mexican elite commander in the sources as the narcos version of ISIS.
For their brutality.
For their calculated military tactics and their unbridled brutality. Their internal structure was quasi-paramilitary. They used hawks, halcones, these dedicated trained lookouts, to feed real-time intelligence to their operational cells.
They weren't just traffickers, they were an occupying army.
Their whole model was shock and awe, scorched earth. It fundamentally changed the rules of engagement in Mexico. It was violence as a brand.
And now the archive talks about CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, who've sort of changed the game again.
They have, by focusing almost exclusively on synthetic drugs. Meth and, of course, fentanyl.
And the interviews show why that's such a game changer, right?
Absolutely. It fundamentally lowers the barrier to entry for organized crime.
Yeah.
You don't need huge tracts of land to grow coca or poppy. You don't need to control territory in the same way.
You just need a lab and the
You
chemicals.
need access to precursor chemicals and a clandestine lab. The capital requirements shrink, which allows for incredibly rapid and incredibly brutal expansion.
So that's the modern cartel model. On the other side of things, you have the traditional mafia.
A completely different world. The archive has extensive interviews with New York mafia-made men, Gambino soldiers, Colombo enforcers.
And what do their accounts show? What are the rules of that life?
It's all about internal rules and tradition, the prohibition against killing strictly for money, the historical, and I stress historical, ban on dealing drugs. It was a completely different model, driven by tradition and loyalty, not just hyper-profit.
So if their strength was defined by those old rules, what does the archive say about their current state? Are they still a major force?
It's interesting. The intelligence from these interviews suggests that some of the strongest, most traditional, and most powerful factions globally are now the Southern Italian groups, particularly the Canadian factions operating out of Ontario.
Why them?
Because they largely escaped the intense federal scrutiny, the RICO statutes, that really decimated the American families from the 80s onward. They were able to operate and grow more freely.
So the power shifted.
The power shifted. And moving beyond those big, famous groups, you get these unique insights into other forms of organized crime.
Like the Chinese underworld.
Exactly. First-person accounts from the triads in New York's Chinatown back in the 70s and 80s. They detail their core rackets, which weren't just about drugs. It was illegal gambling.
What kind of gambling?
Specifically, traditional Chinese games like Pego, which is a domino game, and Mang, a variant of Mahjong. And they talk about the insidious connection between their host clubs and sexual slavery. The level of detail on the mechanics of that world is crucial for understanding the diversity of the underworld economy.
And then, of course, you have the outlaw bikers.
The Hells Angels interviews are fascinating. They reveal their control over regional drug markets, particularly meth in the Bay Area.
But there's one insight from the archive that really stands out about them acting almost like law enforcement.
It's an incredible piece of insight. One member talks about how they would occasionally function as a quasi-law enforcement entity within their own territory. They would actively stop rival gang shootings.
But why?
Because they didn't want the police heat. A shooting brings cops. It brings investigations. And that jeopardizes their primary business interest, which was selling meth. So, in a strange way, they had a vested interest in a certain kind of public order.
The brutal pragmatism of it all.
And then you hear the counterpoint from the ATF agents who infiltrated them, and you get that necessary 360-degree view. The scale and diversity of operations are just staggering.
And to really appreciate that scale, you have to look past the organizational names and get into the cast of characters, the actual people.
That's right. This isn't just a collection of bosses telling war stories. It's the full food chain, from the kid on the corner to the lawyer who cleans the money.
So let's start at the ground floor of that drug trade hierarchy, the street-level dealers. What's the pattern there?
The most consistent theme is how young they start. The archive is filled with people who started out as children, some as young as 12 or 13 years old, selling cocaine or crack.
12 years old.
12 years old. We have figures like Ali Sadiq in Houston talking about this. He frames the crack epidemic as this unexpected lottery ticket that suddenly flooded the historically impoverished ghetto with cash.
It created this immediate
But fleeting and incredibly dangerous path to financial power for kids who had no other options.
And many of those kids, the successful ones, they didn't stay on the street corner for long. They graduated.
They graduated to kingpins and wholesalers. We hear from Detroit drug kingpins who successfully scaled up to become major suppliers for the Mexican cartels that were moving in. Shows this incredible rapid adaptation to market forces.
And then you have the Miami stories, the cocaine godfathers.
Specifically Manny and Rafa. Their conversations in the archive are a masterclass in business strategy. They detail how they were instrumental in verticalizing the Medellin organization in the early 80s.
What does that mean, verticalizing?
It means they controlled the supply chain, end to end, from the lab in Colombia to the final distribution point in Miami. By owning every link in that chain, they made the organization incredibly powerful, and for a time almost policy-proof.
Because there was no middleman to flip.
Exactly.
Right.
And it wasn't just cocaine. We also have these detailed interviews with guys who specialized in other products, like New York marijuana dealers in the pre-legalization era.
And they were moving serious weight.
One guy successfully scaled up to moving 400 pounds of high-quality pot a month. 400 pounds.
Yeah.
The logistical coordination that requires just to avoid detection and manage that amount of cash in a pre-digital world is immense.
So as you move up that chain, you get into the specialists, the people who make the whole thing run, the white-collar enablers.
The indispensable cartel specialists, the accountants, the lawyers,
Yeah.
the people focused on the most critical problem, money laundering.
And there's one account in the archive that is just, it's a perfect example of how that works.
The pain clinic story.
The pain clinic story. Tell us about that.
This is an individual who was financing pain clinics in the U.S. On the surface, a legitimate business. But he was using them as a front, a way to move millions of dollars in cash shipments back across the border.
And he wasn't caught with drugs?
No, he was brought down not because the feds found product, but because they intercepted his cash shipments. In one instance, a $3 million cash shipment, followed by another one for $1.8 million. It shows you the vulnerability of large-scale cash logistics. Sometimes it's easier to follow the money than the drugs.
And then on the other end of the specialist spectrum, you have the sicarios, the hitmen.
And their accounts lay bare the brutal operational tactics required to survive in that world. It's not just about violence. It's about the training for it.
Training to survive torture.
Explicit training on how to survive torture. They detail the reality of enduring techniques like the bolsa,
A plastic bag.
suffocation with a plastic bag, or agua, which is essentially waterboarding. This constant exposure to extreme violence, both receiving it and inflicting it, it illustrates the kind of normalization of cruelty that's required to maintain discipline in the cartel world.
It's a level of brutality that's hard to comprehend. And what makes this archive so unique is that you also hold up the other side, the voices of law, conflict, and enforcement.
You need that counter-narrative.
Yeah.
And it's not always what you'd expect. You hear from NYPD detectives talking about the sheer difficulty of investigating low-level crime.
You mentioned phone snatching.
Yes, specifically the rise of phone snatching in the early 2010s as iPhones became everywhere. These are technically simple assaults, but the sheer volume of them just overwhelmed police capacity, which was always going to be prioritized toward violent felonies. It's a resource management problem.
And then you have the stories of the undercover cops, the people who lived double lives.
Just incredible counts. A white officer who successfully infiltrated a Crip set, ATF agents who became patched members of the Hells Angels.
And the Mexican elite commanders.
Their stories are intense, detailing their asymmetric fight against the Zetas. These commanders recount the tactics the cartels used, like public beheadings and distributing propaganda videos online, all designed explicitly to sow terror in the population and among their rivals.
And when that system finally catches up to someone, the next stop is prison. The archive provides this grim, functional map of life inside from the prison shot callers.
You hear perspectives from the Aryan Brotherhood, detailing the brutal, constant state of warfare and solitary confinement, accounts of guards flooding cells, the overwhelming filth, and the intense racialized organization you need just to survive day to day.
And then there's La M, the Mexican mafia.
Who effectively control the federal yards. Their power is so absolute, we have accounts of them giving the order to execute an informant just days before his scheduled release.
Why? What was the reason?
The story in the archive is that a guard reported he was corresponding with a younger woman through letters. That was it. An internal transgression seen as a threat to discipline. So the murder order came down, with only 10 days left on his sentence.
Unbelievable. And the DC Blacks are also profiled.
Running highly valuable prison drug rackets. And this brings us back to the stark economy of scarcity inside.
The prison gram.
A prison gram of heroin or meth can sell for $600. And we're talking about a dose the size of an M&M peanut. It shows you that organized crime doesn't stop when the prison door slams shut. It just adapts to an environment of maximum scarcity.
Finally, in this cast of characters, you have the informants and witnesses.
And these are some of the rawest accounts in the entire archive. Stories of the stark existential choices people make when they're facing life in prison.
You hear from mafia informants who proffered information but refused to wear a wire.
And their disillusionment later. The realization that the FBI operates on its own agenda. One source recounts saving a federal judge's life. He passed on the intel.
And he thought that would buy him some leverage.
Of course. But he says the FBI agent just shrugged when he asked for help with his own sentence. That cold indifference reveals the brutal reality of cooperation. It's a transaction. It's not about morality.
Shifting gears a bit, a big part of the archive is also dedicated to crimes that don't involve physical violence. white-collar and specialist crime.
It's important to show how criminal opportunity evolves beyond just trafficking. You have these fascinating interviews with money counterfeiters.
And they achieved incredible scale.
One group details making between $1.2 and $1.5 million in counterfeit bills over just 2 years. Their operation, focused on high-quality printing, shows you how specialized nonviolent financial crime can rival the profits of mid-level drug trafficking without anywhere near the same physical risk.
And then there's the professional gamblers. Mickey Mace is a name that comes up.
His insights are crucial because they expose the mechanics of market manipulation in a legal or quasi-legal industry. He reveals how online casinos actively cheat.
How so?
They intentionally restrict access for honest or winning players. He says he was offered $4 million a month to be an influencer for a major casino brand.
Wow.
On the condition that he never revealed the truth about their rigged systems or how they flag successful players to minimize their access to high-stakes tables.
So they wanted to pay him for his silence.
Essentially, yes. And finally, you have the heists and the thieves. The car theft ringleaders detailing their global operation, shipping stolen luxury cars overseas.
And they had this cynical belief about the whole thing.
A genuine belief that the car lots didn't even care about the thefts, because the insurance write-offs guaranteed they got their money back. So in their mind, legitimate commerce was enabling their illicit enterprise. These are the kinds of unfiltered details that policy reports just can't ever capture.
And because you have 380-plus interviews, the archive becomes this living document. It lets you track exactly how the underworld has transformed over the last half-century.
It's a longitudinal study. So we have to start with the 1970s and 1980s, the foundational era, the Miami cocaine explosion.
This period, it really kicks off around the time of that infamous Video Canary case in '78, right?
That's a good marker. And it was characterized by these businessmen from Medellin. They were highly efficient, almost corporate figures. They weren't the typical street narcos you might imagine.
Their objective was different.
Completely. It wasn't about selling dime bags on a corner.
No.
Their number one objective was repatriating billions of dollars back to Colombia. That was the whole game.
Which explains their obsession with cash.
And not just any cash, they exclusively demanded payment in large sums of $100 bills.
By the hundreds.
It's a logistics solution. A small package of hundreds holds vastly more value than a bulky duffel bag full of 20s. It solves a massive cash flow problem for getting the money back to South America. It was Rafa, the Miami godfather, who really architected that verticalization strategy.
And you can contrast that high-margin cocaine world with the pot market of the same era.
A totally different story. We hear accounts where marijuana was practically worthless because the market was so flooded.
How worthless are we talking?
Some sources describe warehouses full of unsold weed in Miami, where you could buy an ounce, what they call a five-finger lid, for as little as $10.
$10 for an ounce? That's unimaginable today.
It is. The challenge back then wasn't selling it, it was getting it. You needed a huge bankroll, maybe $40,000, just to get in the door with the high-volume growers in places like Oregon or California.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even talk to small-time operators.
So that economic shift leads directly into the next pivotal moment, the crack wars and the culture shift of the late 80s and early 90s.
Yellow tops, blue tops, the intense street organization in New York, a whole new era.
And the interviews from that time, they detail this profound cultural split within the hustler class, don't they?
A huge split. The generation that came right before the crack era, the dealers in the early 80s, they often sniffed cocaine socially. It was a status symbol.
Part of the lifestyle.
But the new generation, the guys building empires on crack cocaine, they developed this fierce anti-drug use mentality.
When it changed.
Because using your own product, especially coke or crack, was seen as a sucker move. It showed a lack of discipline. It was a direct threat to the business model. Marijuana was kind of tolerated, but the overall ethos became strictly professional. They saw drug users, even if it was themselves, as a risk to the operation.
That professionalization, that business-first mindset, it really drives the transition into the current state of play, doesn't it?
It does. Modern cartelization and the rise of synthetic drugs.
The rise of the Mexican cartels is central to this modern story. And the key insight from the archive is that their diversification has basically made them immune to certain policy changes.
It shielded them. Things like drug legalization in the U.S.
Right. The interviews confirm that while the U.S. has focused its resources on the traditional war on drugs, the cartels just aggressively moved into other areas.
Human smuggling, now estimated to be a massive $14 billion a year industry, plus extortion, kidnapping.
So any policy that's focused only on stopping narcotics is doomed to fail.
Because the cartels have just diversified their income streams. It's a portfolio. And that diversification is amplified by the synthetic shift,
To move away from plants?
the move from agricultural products like coca and poppy, which need specific climates and a lot of land, to fentanyl and meth. It just lowers the capital and logistical barrier to entry so much.
And that's what allowed a group like CJ&G to grow so fast.
It's what fueled their massive growth and the brutal violence we see in states like Tamaulipas, where the Northeast Cartel and the CDG are locked in these relentless bloodbaths.
And the product itself evolves.
We even see the product evolution in the interviews. Fentanyl production is often mixed with heroin because users started complaining that pure heroin wasn't strong enough anymore compared to prescription opioids. It's a dark form of market responsiveness.
And this all leads to the grim discussions that permeate the archive about state complicity, high-level corruption.
It's a constant theme. We hear these accounts of the former Mexican president allegedly petitioning the U.S. government to release his former security administrator.
Who was then let go, despite having open federal charges in the U.S.
It's this perception of untouchability and influence that just stands out.
And there's that anecdotal report that's even more telling.
The funeral. The claim that federal airspace was closed over La Tuna for Chapo Guzman's mother's funeral. Whether it's literally true or not, the fact that it's believed to be true.
It's a visible sign of cartel influence operating at the highest levels, suggesting that the line between the state and the shadow economy has become dangerously blurred.
So after you listen to hundreds of these stories, certain truths, they stop being unique to one person. They become universal patterns.
The repeating cycle of the game.
Exactly. And the first, most consistent pattern is the entry point and the come up.
The starting age is just alarming.
It's almost always between 12 and 15 years old. The motivation is almost universally rooted in poverty, seeing family members struggle, or just a fierce desire for immediate financial freedom and status.
It's about what that money can buy.
The sources talk about it all the time. The visceral desire for the material symbols of success. Seeing a friend with a brand new pair of sneakers or that classic triple fat goose jacket.
And that desire leads to the economics of scaling up, the come up.
And the pivot point in almost every success story in the archive is the same. It's the realization that the biggest money, the biggest margins, are not in street retail.
It's in transport and supply chain control.
Always. The archive details a great example from drug dealers in California in the late 2000s. They understood this massive arbitrage opportunity.
Between states.
A pound of weed that they could sell for $4,000 in California, they knew could fetch $4,000 a piece in a place like Montana or somewhere on the East Coast.
So that's 4,000 versus 16,000.
That incredible difference in margin, that's the gravitational force that drives the vertical integration. It's what drives the high-risk behavior.
And they knew their time was limited.
The goal wasn't just profit. It was to make millions before legalization puts us out of business. They knew the clock was always ticking against the legitimate market.
But that shadow economy, it's structurally designed to collapse on itself, isn't it? The next universal pattern is the fall.
The inevitability of being caught. And it's rarely a dramatic shootout like in the movies. It's a slow, rational, logistical collapse.
So how does it usually happen?
Capture happens in a few consistent ways that really highlight the effectiveness of intelligence gathering. Sometimes it's the simplest method, intercepted financial shipments. The pain clinic financier, he was brought down purely by cash tracking.
And sometimes it's the paper trail.
In a more complex example, DEA agents used drug ledgers and informant testimony to sentence a trafficker for 580 kilos, even though no physical product was ever found. The paper trail, or now the digital trail, that's the weak link.
And the other major failure point is human, the undercover operations.
It's a recurring theme. Dedicated law enforcement local task forces, the DEA, the FBI, they find the perfect fit to infiltrate a group. That white cop who convincingly infiltrated the crib set. That wasn't an accident. It was a strategic deployment based on psychology and deep background work. The system eventually finds the right person to break the social trust that these organizations need to function.
And that leads to the dilemma of cooperation. This is maybe the most psychologically brutal part of the archive.
It is. The interviews hold these raw, incredibly painful accounts of choosing between loyalty and self-preservation.
Some people choose loyalty.
Some do, like the mafia associate. He refused massive deals that would have granted him freedom because it meant testifying against his lifelong partners.
Oh.
He chose loyalty and decades in prison over being a rat.
But others cooperate, and then they face this deep disillusionment.
The realization that their help, even if it saves a federal judge's life, as one informant recounted, earned them absolutely nothing from the federal government when it came to their own sentence.
It's just a cold transaction.
As one source notes, the FBI is only concerned with its own goals, not the moral choices the informant made. It is a strictly cynical transaction, regardless of the immense personal cost.
And once caught, the final chapter is the aftermath, prison and reentry, which is a whole world unto itself.
Life inside is ruled by a brutal economic and social hierarchy. Your survival depends entirely on understanding the cars, the gangs, and that pervasive economy of scarcity.
We mentioned the $600 prison gram of heroin.
It illustrates how high the internal profit margins are, and violence is completely normalized. We have accounts of guards in Texas prisons openly watching and just allowing fights to happen.
And the gang discipline.
Often involve slashings, known as buck 50s,
Why that name?
because the resulting wounds typically require 150 stitches to close. It's a message.
The psychological toll of that must be immense.
The shift required for survival is intense. Inmates often talk about needing to mentally just excise huge parts of their life. They say you get to live in the moment, forget about the past, don't worry about the future.
It's an extreme focus on the immediate present.
It's a necessary coping mechanism to manage the existential anxiety of constant violence and indefinite confinement.
And then, for those who get out, there's redemption and survival on the outside.
Many interviews explore this haunting, delayed guilt over the devastation their actions caused, the drug trade, the violence.
But there's also the unexpected, almost mundane difficulty of just adapting to normal life after decades inside.
They describe the surreal challenge of dealing with simple civilian logistics, paying car insurance, navigating a mortgage application, realizing how much the technological world has utterly transformed while they were locked away. That loss of control and understanding is often a greater shock than prison itself.
So we circle back to the core question, what does this massive 380-plus interview collection truly offer us? Why does hearing these unfiltered voices matter more than reading a policy paper?
It's the unfiltered first-person perspective. It's access to the critical thinking, the decision-making process of the people who actually live this life. It answers the why, which so often gets smoothed over in official reports.
And it offers these unique insights into motivations you just wouldn't find anywhere else.
Exactly. Hearing a Chinese gang member describe his entry point, being repeatedly bullied as an Asian kid in 1970s Brooklyn and finding his only sense of belonging and power on the streets, that's a story a government report can't tell you.
Or the economic analysis from the car thief who genuinely believed the lots were letting it happen for the insurance money.
Whether he was right or not, that was his rationale. That's the worldview that drove his actions. It creates this perverse idea of a subsidy for organized crime.
And it provides nuanced context on specialized rackets.
The complex difference between what they call a gentleman of leisure pimp and a gangbanging pimp. The subtle psychological manipulation used to put women into debt in the host clubs and sex slavery rings. Those are the mechanics you have to understand.
Which leads directly to the debate. Why should we care? Is this purely academic interest, or does it serve a larger purpose?
The archive provides essential context for modern policy. The voices in here confirm that a U.S. focus solely on the war on drugs is outdated and totally insufficient.
Because the cartels have already moved on.
They've adapted. They've diversified into human smuggling, a $14 billion industry, and extortion. The analysis shows that any policy fix that only targets narcotics will fail because they'll just shift resources to their other equally profitable rackets.
And it highlights that crucial, often overlooked disconnect.
The fact that high-level drug traffickers frequently want safe, low-chaos streets. They genuinely appreciate it when cops target and jail low-level scumbags who create unnecessary attention.
It's bad for business.
It's an unexpected alignment of interests. The big players want stability and low visibility to maximize profit, which means they benefit from the suppression of chaotic, small-time street crime.
So given this overwhelming volume of content, how should you, the listener, use this material? How do you navigate this?
Well, this deep dive today serves as the launch point for an entirely new analysis series. We're going to walk you through the major themes, curated directly from all 380-plus interviews, to give you a structured approach.
We'll dedicate time to specific subjects. We'll analyze the origin stories, the entry points. We'll look at the intricate mechanics of scaling an operation from the street to an enterprise.
We'll trace how supply chains actually operate. We'll compare regional variations, the differences in the rules between, say, the mafia and the Sinaloa cartel.
We'll get into the brutal economics of the underworld, the dynamics of violence, prison survival, and the cold reality of law enforcement and cooperation.
The goal is to give you a complete, structured understanding of this entire ecosystem through the lens of the people who ran it, so you can synthesize this knowledge quickly and effectively.
So we have only just scratched the surface of this massive archive today, but hopefully you now understand the incredible diversity, the sheer scale, and the deep interconnectedness of this shadow economy.
From the $10 five-finger lid in 1978 Miami to the multi-million-dollar cash shipments being intercepted today.
The true value of this collection isn't just in hearing the shocking secrets. It's in recognizing the complicated human beings, driven by ambition, by necessity, by greed operating within what is, at its core, a brutally rational economic system that rewards high-risk adaptation.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. The universal patterns we see of risk-taking, supply chains, vertical integration, and margin-based pricing are often the very same foundational principles that drive success in legitimate global enterprise.
So what does that realization tell us about the fundamental nature of ambition and the structures of economy itself?
Join us next time as we begin the deep dive into the specific themes we've outlined, leveraging the unparalleled archive of the Connect.